Captain Jake Morrison stared through the viewport of Earth's first interstellar ship at the massive alien structure floating in space. The Galactic Council Station stretched for miles in every direction, its crystalline surfaces gleaming with lights from a dozen different species. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his uniform one final time. "Captain, we're receiving their docking instructions," said Communications Officer Lisa Parker from her station behind him. Her voice carried the same nervous excitement that Jake felt in his chest. The past 3 years had led to this moment. Ever since the strange alien probe had appeared in Earth's solar system and transmitted basic mathematical concepts, humanity had worked desperately to build a ship capable of faster-than-light travel. The breakthrough came from reverse engineering. Fragments of the probe's hull, leading to Earth's first crewed jump drive. Now Jake commanded the ESV Unity, humanity's ambassador to the stars. The ship was nothing impressive by galactic standards, he knew. Fusion-powered, armed with simple railguns, and barely capable of 2 light-year jumps. But it represented everything humanity could accomplish in 3 short years. "Take us in." "Pilot," Jake ordered. A Unity moved slowly toward the docking bay, dwarfed by alien ships that looked like works of art compared to Earth's boxy design. The docking bay doors opened to reveal a welcoming committee of various alien species. Jake had studied the files Earth's xenobiologists had compiled, but seeing them in person still took his breath away. The Krolix delegation stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scaled skin gleaming under the station lights. Their military bearing was unmistakable even across species lines. Beside them waited the Zephyrians, tall and graceful with skin that seemed to shift color in the light. Their technology was legendary throughout the galaxy, according to the probe's data files. The third group consisted of the Valdori, ancient beings who appeared to be made of living crystal, their collective consciousness spanning thousands of individual forms. Jake straightened his shoulders and walked down the Unity's ramp with his small diplomatic team. The station's artificial gravity felt strange under his feet, slightly lighter than Earth normal. "Welcome, humans of Earth," spoke the lead Krolix in accented but clear English. The translator device around his neck glowed softly. "I am Commander Vextar of the Krolix Empire. We have been curious to meet the newest species to achieve interstellar travel." The tone was polite, but Jake caught something else underneath it. Amusement, perhaps? He pushed the thought aside and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for this opportunity," Jake replied. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, representing the people of Earth. We're honored to join the galactic community." "Commander." Vextar looked at Jake's extended hand with what might have been confusion before carefully reaching out with one clawed finger to touch Jake's palm. Several of the other aliens made sounds that the translator couldn't interpret, but their body language suggested laughter. The tour of the station began immediately. Jake and his team were shown through corridors filled with wonders beyond imagination. Energy shields, gravity manipulators, matter converters, and dozens of other technologies that seemed like magic to human eyes. "Your species achieved space travel recently?" asked Kolenth, a Zephyrian scientist whose skin currently showed patterns of blue and silver. "We landed on our moon about 60 years ago," Jake replied proudly. "We've had space stations for 40 years, and we've sent probes to every planet in our solar system." This time the alien laughter was unmistakable. Even through the translator, Jake could hear the condescension. 60 years, repeated Kolenth, speaking to his companions. "And they consider this an achievement worthy of mention." Jake felt his face flush red, but he forced himself to remain diplomatic. "We've also developed sustainable energy sources, eliminated several diseases, and established a global communication network." "How long has your species been civilized?" asked Ixmor, the Valdori elder, whose crystal form pulsed with soft light. We've had agriculture for about 12,000 years, Jake answered. Written language for about 6,000 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake watched as the aliens exchanged glances that clearly communicated their thoughts without words. 12,000 years, Vextar said slowly, and you have only just achieved interstellar travel. Most species accomplish this within 2 centuries of developing agriculture, added Kolinth. The Krolix achieved interstellar travel in 130 years. The Zephyrians in 87 years. Jake felt his diplomatic smile faltering. We had some setbacks along the way. Setbacks, repeated Ixmore. What kind of setbacks could delay development for 12 millennia? Jake hesitated. How could he explain humanity's history of warfare, conflict, and self-destruction to beings who had apparently avoided such problems entirely? We had periods of conflict that slowed our progress, he said carefully. Conflict? Vextar's scaled head tilted to one side. You mean warfare against other species? No, Jake admitted. Warfare against other humans. The laughter that erupted from the aliens was no longer polite or restrained. Even the crystal forms of the Valdori seemed to vibrate with amusement. You fought yourselves, Kolinth managed between what sounded like chuckles. Instead of exploring the universe, you spent 12,000 years fighting your own kind. Jake's diplomatic training warred with his growing anger. These beings were treating humanity like children playing with toys. The formal presentation took place in a vast chamber filled with delegates from dozens of species. Jake stood at a podium designed for beings much larger than humans. Feeling smaller by the minute, he showed them images of Earth's greatest achievements. The pyramids, the Great Wall, the International Space Station. He spoke of human art, music, and literature. He described humanity's scientific breakthroughs and technological innovations. But with each accomplishment he mentioned, the alien audience seemed less impressed. When he finished describing the Mars colonies, Vextar stood to address the assembly. The humans have achieved remarkable things, the Krolix commander said with barely concealed mockery. In only 12,000 years, they have managed to travel to their neighboring planet. Their weapons technology appears to be based on accelerating metal projectiles, and their fastest ships use controlled nuclear fusion. The laughter that filled the chamber made Jake's ears burn with shame. Perhaps, suggested Kolinth, we should classify them as a developing species requiring guidance and supervision. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be granted the lowest tier of galactic citizenship, essentially making Earth a protectorate under alien oversight. As Jake walked back to his ship, his diplomatic team silent around him, Lisa Parker finally spoke. Captain, she said quietly, maybe we should show them something else about humanity. What do you mean? Jake asked without looking up from the deck plating. There's a transmission coming from Earth right now. A high school history class in Denver. The teacher is covering World War II. Jake stopped walking. You want to show them a history lesson? Why not? Lisa asked. They think they know everything about us based on our technology. Maybe it's time they learned about our history. Jake considered this for a long moment. What did they have to lose? The aliens already considered humanity a joke. Set up the transmission. He decided. Let's see what they think of Professor Henderson's history class. Commander Vextar entered the observation chamber with his usual confidence, followed by Kolinth and Ixmore. The 3 alien leaders had agreed to watch this human transmission purely for entertainment value. After the embarrassing diplomatic presentation, they expected to see primitive rituals or simple agricultural knowledge being passed down to young humans. This should be amusing, Kolinth said, his skin shifting to patterns of green and gold that indicated mild curiosity. I wonder if they still teach their offspring to hunt with wooden spears. The large viewing screen activated, showing a simple classroom on Earth. 30 human children sat at desks, facing a middle-aged man who stood near a wall covered with maps and pictures. The man wore plain clothes and held a small device in his hand. "Good morning, class," the teacher said. "I'm Mr. Paul Henderson, and today we're going to continue our study of World War II. Can anyone tell me what happened on September 1st, 1939? A young human female raised her hand. "Germany invaded Poland." "That's right, Katie," Mr. Henderson replied. "And what did this invasion lead to?" Another student answered, "Britain and France declared war on Germany 2 days later." Vexstar leaned back in his chair, already losing interest. A small territorial dispute between primitive tribes hardly seemed worth their attention, but as Mr. Henderson continued his lesson, the aliens began to pay closer attention. The teacher spoke of something called the Holocaust, describing how humans systematically murdered 6 million of their own species based on their religion and ethnicity. The concentration camps were designed for mass killing, Mr. Henderson explained, showing pictures that made several students look away. The Nazis built an entire industrial system devoted to genocide. Ixmor's crystal form stopped pulsing. In all their thousands of years of existence, the Valdori had never encountered a species that created factories specifically for killing their own kind. "But teacher," asked a student named Bobby, "why didn't other countries stop this sooner?" "That's a complicated question," Mr. Henderson replied. "Many countries were dealing with their own problems. The United States didn't enter the war until Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. The teacher pulled down a map showing the entire planet Earth divided into different colored regions. By 1942, the war had spread across 6 continents. Over 60 nations were involved in the fighting. Colin's skin turned pale blue, indicating confusion. 60 nations, he whispered to his companions. Their entire planet was at war. Mr. Henderson continued describing battles and campaigns that spanned years. He spoke of the siege of Stalingrad, where over 2 million humans died fighting for control of a single city. He described D-Day, when 150,000 human soldiers landed on enemy beaches, knowing that thousands would die in the first hour. "The Battle of the Bulge lasted for 6 weeks, Mr. Henderson said, pointing to locations on his map. American forces were surrounded and outnumbered, but they refused to surrender. When the German commander demanded their surrender, General McAuliffe replied with a single word, "Nuts." The students laughed at this story, but the aliens watching did not find it amusing. Vexstar, who had conquered 12 worlds for the Kralix Empire, had never encountered defenders who responded to surrender demands with jokes. A student raised her hand. "Mr. Henderson, how did the war finally end?" The teacher paused for a moment, his expression growing serious. "The United States developed a new weapon. On August 6, 1945, they dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, they dropped another on Nagasaki." "What's an atomic bomb?" asked a young boy in the front row. "It's a weapon that splits atoms to create an enormous explosion," Mr. Henderson explained. "The bomb dropped on Hiroshima destroyed 4 square miles of the city instantly. Over 100,000 people died. The classroom fell silent. Even the alien observers sat without speaking. Katie raised her hand again. Was it right to use those bombs? Mr. Henderson set down his pointer and looked at his students carefully. "That's one of the most difficult questions in history. Katie, the bombs ended the war and probably saved millions of lives that would have been lost in an invasion of Japan. But they also killed thousands of innocent people, including children. Like yourselves. So there's no right answer?" asked Bobby. "Sometimes in war, there are no good choices," Mr. Henderson replied. "Leaders must make terrible decisions and live with the consequences. The men who ordered those bombs carried that weight for the rest of their lives. Kolinth turned to his companions. They created weapons capable of destroying entire cities, then agonized over whether to use them. The humans killed over 100,000 of their own species to end the war, Ixmore added. Yet their children debate the morality of this decision decades later. Vextar said nothing, but his scaled hands gripped the arms of his chair. His own species had never hesitated to use devastating weapons against their enemies. Mr. Henderson continued his lesson, describing the war's aftermath. World War II ended in 1945, but it wasn't the last war humans fought. We've had conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East, and dozens of other places since then. How many wars have humans fought in total? Asked a student. Mr. Henderson smiled grimly. Historians estimate that humans have fought approximately 14,000 wars throughout recorded history. We've been at war somewhere on Earth for 92% of the time since we began keeping records. The silence in the alien observation chamber was complete. Even the soft humming of the ship's systems seemed loud in the quiet room. But here's what's remarkable, Mr. Henderson continued. Despite all this conflict, humans have also created beautiful art, amazing music, and incredible literature. We've built hospitals and schools. We've developed medicine that saves lives and technology that connects people across the globe. A student raised her hand. How can we do both? Fight wars and create beautiful things? That's what makes humans unique, Mr. Henderson replied. We're capable of both great destruction and great creation, sometimes at the same time. The lesson ended with Mr. Henderson assigning homework about the causes of World War II. As the students filed out of the classroom, the teacher began erasing the board, preparing for his next class. The viewing screen went dark, leaving the three alien leaders sitting in stunned silence. Finally, Vextar spoke. They've been fighting continuously for their entire recorded history, and they've never destroyed themselves, Kolinth added, despite possessing weapons capable of eliminating their entire species. Ixmore's crystal form pulsed slowly. Most species either destroy themselves during their violent phase or transcend violence entirely. These humans seem to exist in permanent contradiction. What kind of species creates systematic genocide and then teaches their children to question the morality of ending it? Vextar asked. A dangerous one, Kolinth replied quietly. The three aliens sat in the darkness, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had just witnessed. The simple history lesson had revealed something about humanity that their primitive technology could not. They were not a weak species that had stumbled into space by accident. They were survivors of conflicts that would have destroyed most civilizations. And they had somehow emerged stronger rather than weaker from their trials by fire. 3 hours after watching the history class, Commander Vextar stood in the Galactic Council's main database chamber. The room hummed with energy as massive computers processed information from across the galaxy. But today, all that processing, power was focused on a single planet, Earth. Show me everything, Vextar commanded the technician. I want complete access to all human historical records that we intercepted from their information networks. Kolinth and Ixmore joined him as holographic displays filled the chamber with images, documents, and video recordings from human history. What they saw in the next few hours would change their understanding of humanity forever. The first records they examined were from something called the Mongol Empire. Kolinth read the data aloud, his skin shifting to deep purple patterns of confusion. A human named Genghis Khan conquered most of the known world in the 13th century, he said. His army used horses and bows made of wood and metal. Number: energy weapons, no aircraft, no advanced technology of any kind. How large was his empire? Asked Vextar. 12 million square miles, Kolinth replied. Larger than any single territory the Krolliks have ever controlled. Vextar stared at the holographic map showing the extent of Mongol conquests. His own species had conquered 47 worlds using plasma weapons, shield technology, and faster-than-light travel. Yet these primitive humans had built a larger empire using nothing but animals and sharp metal. How did they coordinate military actions across such distances without communication technology? He asked. The database provided the answer. A complex system of messengers on horseback that could carry information thousands of miles in just weeks. The Mongols had built an information network, spanning continents using nothing but human riders and fast horses. Ixmor's crystal form began displaying rapid color changes as the Valdori collective mind processed this information. They created a functioning empire larger than our own territory, using pre-industrial technology. This should be impossible. But the Mongol Empire was just the beginning. The aliens discovered the Roman Empire, which had lasted over 1,000 years while constantly fighting wars on multiple fronts. They learned about Alexander the Great, who conquered most of the known world before his 25th birthday. They read about Napoleon, who nearly conquered all of Europe despite being outnumbered in most of his battles. These are not isolated incidents, Vextar realized. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. The next discovery was even more disturbing. The database contained records of human technological development during periods of intense warfare. The aliens watched in amazement as humans invented gunpowder, cannons, and advanced metallurgy during the same centuries. They were creating magnificent art and architecture. Look at this, Colin said, highlighting records from Earth's Renaissance period. In the 5th, 10th, and 16th centuries, humans simultaneously produced master artists like Leonardo, Vinci, and Michelangelo, while also developing improved cannons and fortification systems. The holographic display showed images of beautiful paintings and sculptures alongside technical drawings of weapons and military engineering. The same humans who created the Sistine Chapel also designed more efficient ways to destroy castle walls. Da Vinci designed flying machines, painted masterpieces, and invented new siege weapons, Ixmor observed. How can one species contain such contradictions? Vextar pulled up military records from more recent human conflicts. What he found there made his blood run cold. The American Civil War had produced casualty rates that exceeded most interstellar conflicts. The Battle of Gettysburg alone had killed more soldiers in 3 days than the Kroleks had lost in their last 10 planetary conquests combined. They fight each other with the same intensity we reserve for our greatest enemies, he muttered. But it was the 20th century records that truly shocked them. 2 global wars within 30 years, each more destructive than the last. The aliens studied battle footage from places called Verdun, the Somme, and Stalingrad. They watched human soldiers charge through poison gas and artillery bombardments. That would have broken the morale of most galactic species. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted for 5 months, Kolinth read from the records. 2 million casualties. The humans fought for control of individual buildings, sometimes for weeks at a time. Vextar had commanded troops in urban warfare before, but never anything like this. Most species surrendered cities rather than fight house-to-house battles. That could last for months. The database provided video footage of the D-Day landings. The aliens watched in stunned silence as thousands of human soldiers jumped from aircraft into enemy fire, or charged up beaches while machine guns cut down their companions. Their casualty projections for the first day were 12,000 dead, Ixmor noted. They proceeded with the attack anyway. Why? Asked Kolinth. Any rational species would have found another approach. The answer came in the form of recorded speeches by human leaders. They watched footage of a human named Winston Churchill telling his people they would fight on beaches, in streets, and in hills, never surrendering. They heard recordings of American President Franklin Roosevelt declaring that the only thing to fear was fear itself. They don't just accept casualties, Vextar realized. They expect them, plan for them, and continue fighting despite them. But perhaps most disturbing of all was what they learned about the Cold War. For nearly 50 years, two human superpowers had pointed weapons at each other that could destroy their entire planet. Not just cities or countries, but their entire. WORLD, Dr. Susan Walsh, the human historian who had been brought aboard to help explain the records, stood before the three alien leaders in the database chamber. "You have to understand," she said, "the Cold War was fought with the constant knowledge that one mistake could end human civilization. Yet both sides continued developing more powerful weapons while simultaneously creating art, exploring space, and advancing science." "How many of these planet-destroying weapons did you build?" asked Vextar. "At peak deployment, about 70,000 nuclear warheads," Dr. Walsh replied calmly. The silence that followed was deafening. Most species considered it dangerous to keep even a few world-ending weapons in storage. Humans had built enough to destroy their planet hundreds of times over. "And you never used them," Ixmore said, more as a statement than a question. "Not in warfare," Dr. Walsh confirmed. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction kept the peace for decades. Both sides knew that attacking would mean their own destruction. Colin's skin had turned completely white, indicating shock. "You used the threat of total annihilation as a peacekeeping tool." "It worked," Dr. Walsh said with a slight shrug. "No nuclear weapons had been used in warfare since 1945. The aliens spent the rest of the day reviewing more records. They learned about the Crusades, the 100 Years' War, the American Revolution, and dozens of other conflicts. Each war revealed new aspects of human nature that contradicted everything they thought they knew about intelligent species development. By the end of their research session, one fact had become undeniably clear. Humans had not been delayed in their technological development due to incompetence or stupidity. They had been delayed because they spent most of their energy and resources fighting the most dangerous opponents they had ever encountered, other humans. "We need to call an emergency session of the Council," Vextar said finally. "Everything we thought we knew about this species is wrong." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 12 hours after the aliens finished reviewing human historical records. Representatives from 47 species filled the great assembly hall, their voices creating a buzz of confusion and concern that echoed off the crystalline walls. Commander Vextar stood at the central podium, his usual confidence replaced by something the other delegates had never seen before: uncertainty. Behind him, massive holographic displays showed images from human history that had kept the Krolix military analysts awake all night. "Fellow delegates," Vextar began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "We have called this emergency session because our initial assessment of the human species was fundamentally incorrect." A ripple of surprise moved through the assembly. The Galactic Council had never before revised a species classification so quickly after first contact. "When we first met the humans yesterday, we classified them as a primitive developing species based on their slow technological advancement," Vextar continued. "We assumed they lacked the intelligence or capability to achieve faster progress. We were wrong." The holographic displays activated, showing footage from human wars throughout history. The assembled delegates fell silent as they watched human soldiers charging through impossible odds, fighting battles that should have been hopeless, and somehow winning conflicts against superior numbers and technology. The humans did not achieve interstellar travel slowly because they were incompetent, Vextar explained. They achieved it slowly because they spent 12,000 years fighting the most dangerous opponents in their galaxy, other humans. Delegate Zorkith of the Hegemony raised a tentacle in question. "Commander Vextar, surely you exaggerate. How dangerous could primitive humans be to each other? Vextar nodded to Colinth, who stepped forward to address the assembly. The Zephyrian. Scientist's skin displayed patterns of deep concern as he spoke. We have analyzed over 14,000 human conflicts, spanning 6,000 years of recorded history, Colinth said. What we discovered challenges everything we know about species development patterns. The displays showed battle maps from dozens of human wars. The delegates watched as colored areas moved across continents, representing armies and territories, changing hands in conflicts that lasted for decades. Most galactic species develop military technology for hunting animals or defending against natural predators. Colinth continued. They then adapt these tools for occasional territorial disputes with their own kind. Humans developed their military technology exclusively for fighting other humans. What does this mean in practical terms? Asked Elder Mortal of the Confederation. It means their weapons, tactics, and strategies have been refined through millennia of warfare against opponents with identical intelligence, creativity, and determination, Colinth replied. They have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of defeating enemies who think exactly like they do. The implications of this statement sank in slowly among the delegates. Most species had never faced opponents as intelligent as themselves. Their military doctrines were designed for fighting lesser creatures or for brief conflicts with other civilized species who preferred negotiation to extended warfare. Ixmore stepped forward, the Valdori Elder's crystal form pulsing with urgent light patterns. The Valdori Collective has processed the available data on human conflict patterns. What we discovered is unprecedented in galactic history. Please elaborate, Elder Ixmore, requested the council speaker. Humans have maintained active warfare somewhere on their planet for 92% of their recorded civilization, Ixmore explained. But instead of destroying themselves or stagnating culturally, they have somehow used constant conflict as a catalyst for advancement. The holographic displays shifted to show human achievements during wartime. The delegates saw how humans had developed advanced mathematics during the siege of Syracuse, created revolutionary art during the Renaissance Wars, and made breakthrough scientific discoveries during their global conflicts. They fight and create simultaneously, Ixmore continued. During their most destructive century, they also produced the greatest literature, most beautiful music, and most advanced technology. This pattern is completely unknown among documented civilizations. Delegate Thexner of the Maritime Alliance spoke up. Surely their primitive weapons pose no threat to advanced species. What harm could kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives do against our energy shields and plasma weapons? Vextar's scaled face showed what might have been a grim smile. Admiral Harthex of our military command has prepared an analysis of human weapons technology. Admiral? A larger Krolix officer stepped forward, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the assembly lights. Admiral Harthex had conquered more worlds than any other military leader in Krolix history, but his usual pride was nowhere to be seen. Distinguished delegates, the Admiral began, I have spent 30 years studying military tactics across the galaxy. In all that time, I have never encountered weapon systems as efficiently designed for their purpose as human military technology. The displays showed technical specifications of human weapon systems. Simple in design, but devastatingly effective in application. Their kinetic weapons are not primitive, Admiral Harthex explained. They are optimized. A human rifle can kill at distances exceeding 2 kilometers using ammunition that costs almost nothing to produce. Their artillery systems can destroy targets 50 kilometers away with mathematical precision. But surely our shields can deflect such simple projectiles, protested Delegate Krivos. Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons and plasma bolts, the Admiral replied. They are far less effective against solid projectiles traveling at hypersonic speeds. Human weapons would require completely different defensive systems than anything we currently deploy. The assembly stirred uneasily as they realized the implications. Their advanced technology was optimized for fighting other energy weapon civilizations, not species that had perfected kinetic warfare. Furthermore, Admiral Harthex continued, human tactical doctrine is unlike anything in our military databases. They have developed strategies for fighting in every possible environment: underwater, underground, in cities, in forests, in deserts, and in frozen wastelands. They have created specialized units for every type of combat scenario imaginable. How is this possible? Asked Elder Morto. Because they have actually fought in all those environments, the Admiral replied. Not in simulations or training exercises, but in real combat against equally skilled opponents. They have tested every tactic, refined every strategy, and learned from every failure through actual warfare. Dr. Susan Walsh was brought forward to provide the human perspective on their military development. She looked small and fragile compared to the alien delegates, but her voice was steady as she addressed the assembly. Our military development was driven by necessity, she explained. Every human civilization knew that somewhere on our planet, other humans were developing better weapons and tactics. If you fell behind, you didn't lose a trade dispute or territorial negotiation. You ceased to exist as a people. So you were forced to innovate or die, observed Ixmore. Exactly, Dr. Walsh confirmed. For thousands of years, military superiority meant survival. This created an evolutionary pressure that most species never experience. The council speaker called for a brief recess to allow delegates to process this information. In small groups throughout the assembly hall, representatives from dozens of species discussed what they had learned. When the session resumed, the mood had changed completely. The casual dismissal of humanity that had characterized the previous day was replaced by wary respect and growing concern. The question before us, announced the council speaker, is how we should classify a species that has spent millennia perfecting warfare against opponents as intelligent as themselves, yet has somehow avoided complete self-destruction. There is another question, added Admiral Harthex quietly. What happens when they inevitably turn their military expertise toward external threats? The silence that followed was profound. Every delegate in the assembly was thinking the same thing. They might be looking at the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered, disguised as primitive newcomers who had only just learned to travel between stars. The vote to reclassify humanity was unanimous, but not in the way anyone had expected when the day began. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council Station with slow, measured steps. 24 hours had passed since the emergency session, and he had been summoned back to meet with the alien delegates. He expected another round of condescending lectures about humanity's primitive technology and need for supervision. Instead, he found something that confused him more than any insult could have: respect. The first sign came from the Krolix guards at the entrance to the diplomatic wing. Instead of the casual dismissal he had received before, they stood at full attention and offered what appeared to be a formal military salute. Jake returned the gesture uncertainly, wondering what had changed. Commander Vexstar waited for him, in the same conference room where humanity had been mocked just one day earlier. But the Krolix commander's entire demeanor had transformed. Gone was the barely concealed amusement, replaced by something Jake had never expected to see in alien eyes: wariness. Captain Morrison, Vexstar said, rising from his chair as Jake entered. Please, take a seat. We have much to discuss. Jake sat down slowly, studying the alien's body language. Every gesture seemed more careful, more respectful than before. The Council has reconsidered our initial assessment of humanity, Vexstar continued. We would like to offer your species immediate Tier 2 citizenship status, access to advanced technological exchanges, and a permanent seat on the Galactic Council. Jake blinked in surprise. Yesterday you classified us as a developing species requiring supervision. What changed? We watched your history class, Vexstar replied simply. A high school history lesson changed your mind about our entire species? That, and the 12 hours of research that followed, Vexstar admitted. Captain Morrison, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Have you ever been in combat? Jake nodded. I served in the Pacific War against the Chinese Alliance before I became a space pilot. Why do you ask? Vexstar's scaled hands gripped the edge of the table. I have conquered 12 worlds for the Krolix Empire. I have led armies across continents and commanded fleets that destroyed entire space stations. But I have never fought against opponents who were as intelligent, creative, and determined as myself. I don't understand what you're getting at. Your species has been at war for 92% of recorded history, Vexstar explained. But you have never fought aliens or lesser creatures. You have spent thousands of years fighting other humans, opponents who think like you, plan like you, and adapt like you. Jake frowned. That's just our history. Every species must have gone through similar periods. No, Captain Morrison, they have not. Vexstar leaned forward. Most species develop military technology for hunting animals or defending against natural disasters. They might have brief territorial disputes with their own kind, but these conflicts typically last weeks or months, not centuries. So what are you saying? I am saying that humans are the only known species to have spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare against opponents exactly as intelligent as themselves, Vexstar replied. Your weapons, tactics, and strategies have been tested and refined through actual combat in ways that no other civilization has experienced. Jake was beginning to understand the implications, but he remained cautious. And this concerns you? It terrifies me, Vexstar admitted. Captain, our energy shields are designed to stop plasma weapons and particle beams. They provide minimal protection against kinetic projectiles traveling at hypersonic speeds. Your primitive railguns would be devastatingly effective against our current defensive systems. The conversation continued for another hour, with Jake learning more about galactic military doctrine than he had ever expected. It became clear that most alien species fought wars like elaborate chess games, with careful positioning and technological superiority determining the outcome. The concept of prolonged conflict between equally matched opponents was foreign to them. When the meeting ended, Jake walked back toward his ship in a daze. The corridors of the station seemed different somehow, with alien civilians stepping aside respectfully as he passed. Some even offered what appeared to be bows of acknowledgement. Lisa Parker was waiting for him in the Unity's briefing room, along with Dr. Susan Walsh, who had remained aboard the station as a cultural liaison. How did it go, Captain? Lisa asked. They're afraid of us, Jake replied, still trying to process what he had learned. The most advanced military civilization in this part of the galaxy is afraid of humans. Dr. Walsh nodded grimly. I spent a day talking with their historians and military analysts. They've been studying our records obsessively. What frightens them most is not our weapons or our tactics, but our mindset. What do you mean? Other species see war as an aberration, Dr. Walsh explained. Something unnatural that should be. End it as quickly as possible. They fight to achieve specific goals, then stop fighting when those goals are met. And humans don't? Humans see war as a natural state of existence, she continued. We fight not just to win, but to survive. We've developed entire philosophies around concepts like honor, sacrifice, and acceptable losses. We plan for long campaigns, prepare for high casualties, and continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. Jake thought about his own military training, remembering lessons about unit cohesion under fire and the importance of never surrendering while you still had ammunition. They're particularly disturbed by our treatment of prisoners and civilians, Dr. Walsh added. Most galactic species follow very strict rules about limiting conflict to military targets. Humans have a much more flexible approach to warfare. You mean we're more ruthless? We're more practical, she corrected. We understand that wars are won by breaking the enemy's will to fight, not just by destroying their armies. This includes psychological warfare, economic pressure, and targeting infrastructure. Lisa looked between them with growing concern. So what happens now? Do they want to ally with us or keep us contained? Both, Jake replied. They're offering us advanced technology and full membership in their galactic community. But they're also making sure they know exactly where we are and what we're doing at all times. Smart of them, Dr. Walsh observed. They realize that trying to suppress humanity would only prove that we have external enemies worth fighting. Better to keep us happy and pointed away from their territories. 3 days later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Unity as they prepared to depart for Earth. The Galactic Council had provided them with new engine designs, advanced communication systems, and detailed star charts showing the locations of dozens of habitable worlds. But he couldn't shake the memory of his final conversation with Admiral Harthex. The Krollik's military commander had pulled him aside just before departure. Captain Morrison, the Admiral had said, I have one last question for you. What is it, Admiral? Your species has spent 12,000 years fighting each other instead of exploring the galaxy. Now that you have access to interstellar travel and knowledge of other civilizations, what will you do with all that military expertise? Jake had considered the question carefully before answering. I suppose we'll finally have something other than each other to fight, he had replied. The Admiral's expression had made it clear that this was exactly what he had feared. Now, as Earth grew larger in the view screen, Jake wondered what humanity would become when they no longer had to fight themselves for survival. Would they turn their warrior nature toward exploration and discovery, or would they eventually find new enemies among the stars? Back on Earth, in a small classroom in Denver, Mr. Paul Henderson was beginning his next lesson. Today, we're going to study The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he told his students, unaware that his previous lesson had already changed humanity's place in the galaxy forever. This ancient Chinese text is still used by military leaders around the world because it teaches U.S. fundamental truths about conflict and strategy. He had no idea that somewhere in space, alien civilizations were reading the same text and trying to understand how a species could spend thousands of years perfecting the art of war while somehow avoiding complete self-destruction. The answer, they were beginning to realize, was that humans had not avoided destruction through luck or accident. They had avoided it through the same careful planning, strategic thinking, and adaptive intelligence that made them so dangerous in the first place. And that realization was perhaps the most frightening discovery of all.